Okay, so this section that we're going to be doing for context notes has to do with art style and the characteristics of this art. And one of the main things that we're going to be seeing is um, one of the things it's going to focus on is challenging us to look at our own morality, behavior, and then also there's this long period of apathy that happens in the 50s. So they want to look at and challenge the complacency of the people. Okay, so let's see. Art since the 1950s is often not pretty and difficult to understand, which is kind of ironic since it reflects our own recent past. It often, however, holds a mirror to contemporary life, revealing things we might not see or hear in any other context and forces us to confront ourselves in a mirror. What makes it difficult to understand is that it has become so diverse and cannot be easily defined through a list of visual characteristics or art themes or artistic themes or cultural concerns. So, one of the things that develops is the New York School around the 1950s, and this is where abstract expressionism is created. The New York School was not a formally organized movement. It's really more of a loosely affiliated group of artists who were bound by a common purpose to express their profound social alienation after World War II and to make art that was both moral and universal. It's definitely influenced by theories of the psychoanalyst Carl Jung, who described a collective unconscious shared by all humans. The abstract expressionists aspired to create heroic and sublime works that had universally symbolic forms. They shared some things in common, um, an interest in their traditional painting, but again, the desire to rebel against it and to recalibrate the ideas of European modernism. The desire to treat and act painting on canvas as a self-contained expressive exercise, the mining of Jung's archetype for to communicate universal ideas in painting, and an ambition to paint sublime art on a heroic scale. At its core, this art is autonomous and deeply meaningful, with the act of painting itself often being the subject. Okay, my next point up is assemblages from the 1950s, and this will challenge the previous assumptions by the abstract expressionists of the New York School. They believe art should be firmly anchored in real life. And it made art that was connected to and inspired by the visual culture of post-war America. This is the really has to do with pop art. Pop developed at a time when the individual and mass identity was increasingly determined by how people looked, dressed, and as well as what they consumed and displayed. The visible display of objects reflected life as it was portrayed on TV, in films, and in advertising. Pop artists critique the superficiality of pop culture's fiction of the perfect home and perfect person, and the idea of the 50s being this idealized and perfect time period. Another part of that we're seeing is photography. Photography is going to become more critical. It's more of a social commentary and less prideful. And so we do see that expand during this time period. Pop art in the 1960s is really all about critiquing the consumer culture. So that is going to, that's what we see with Warhol and with Lichtenstein. For minimalism, it formed at the same time that pop art. And the roots of minimalism really extend back to the ready-mades of Duchamp and the structural and spatial consideration of Russian constructivism. Minimalists question the role, purpose, and relevance of the art object in the contemporary culture. It produced slab or box-like sculptures frequently made from prefabricated industrial materials. It totally rejects the handcrafted object as well as the traditional sculptural materials, and it presents the object as form divorced from symbolic or personal content. Okay, and then we have the feminist art, which develops alongside the women's liberation movement. And there are actually three waves of feminist art. In the 1960s, the major aim was to gain increased recognition for both female artists in the past and the present. This involved making women a part of the art history canon of important artists. Also, currently, it involved representing the physicality and sexuality of the female body from a female perspective. It was very essentialist and focused on women's bodies and defined gender in biological terms. And then in the 1970s, for the feminist art, we see defining gender in more relative terms. One feminist writer, Linda Nochlin, wrote an essay arguing that if women throughout history were excluded from traditional art academies, then it's unfair to judge female artists at the same level as their male counterparts. And it called for a reevaluation of traditional feminine arts, including ceramics, textiles, and jewelry making. And then it moves on to the 1990s. And the 1990s address an expanded range of issues surrounding discrimination and the denigration of women. Okay, and then we have performance art, and that started in the 1960s, and it still happens to this day. Banksy does a lot of performance art. Aside from his graffiti art, he also will do performance art as well, which we could talk about later. It's basically enacted with new and novel ways, and it can be recorded on film and on video. And then Earthworks is going to be one piece in particular that we'll talk about, and that's made outdoors, frequently used materials found on the site. It's usually site specific, and sometimes it permanently altered the landscape, and then sometimes it's temporary. For architecture, mid-century architecture in the 50s and 60s adopted the international style, and that's partially because of the fact that European architects immigrated to the United States and assumed important positions in architectural schools. So they're training the students to follow the international style. And make sure you recall what the international style is. Villa Savoy, that's in Paris before the breakout of World War II. And the original utopian and revolutionary aspects of modernist architecture came to be used for structures that represented corporate power and wealth. And then we have postmodern architecture, which is the 1970s, and that completely moves away from the sleek frames and reintroduced ideas from past styles. It's considered less clean, or, skyscrapers, how they're so, just clean. And there's more ornamentation, and this is challenging the international style of architecture that begins with Le Corbusier. And we'll see that happen more when we talk about the modernist art in architecture. Okay, so that is the art style and characteristics notes, and we will move on to the art pieces, hopefully in class, but I may be doing some more screencasts, so we'll just have to see. All right, thanks guys for taking these notes, and I will see you soon.